You're listening to the new media. You're listening to Mitchell Talks. Learn more at MitchellTalks.com and follow me, Scott Mitchell, on Twitter at Mitchell Talks. This is episode 11 of the All the Above Energy Podcast on Mitchell Talks. In part 3 of my conversation with former Energy and Environment Secretary Mike Teague, we began with a discussion of how he addressed the earthquake situation through a concept called coordinating councils, and why that model is working on other energy and environmental issues. Plus, he offers his perspective on what Oklahomans ought to know about energy producers, not the stereotypes often repeated by the public and the media. Plus, what's next in Mike Teague's career? He tells you next in episode 3.
The first day that I started for Governor Fallin, I didn't even know all the different agencies and boards that were part of energy and environment, and I didn't have any exposure to most of them, to include the Corporation Commission and the Geologic Survey. And so we brought the 10 or so of those agencies that are kind of the full-time ones. We were using the governor's large conference room because we didn't even have an office. And I said, just go around the room and tell me what are the top 3 things that you're working on in your agency. And Laura Rotenberry was at the Corporation Commission at the time, and she said earthquakes. And again, at the time in 2013, if you lived in Tulsa, I felt the Prague earthquake, but I didn't feel the rest of them. I didn't know why we were talking about earthquakes. The Geologic Survey was across the table, and they said, oh yeah, we're working on earthquakes too, and DEQ. And I said, are you guys all working together? I was like, meh, kinda. And so you had state agencies that were all working around this problem and not really working closely in cooperation together. And then the earthquakes truly started to, ramp. The numbers started to ramp up, and they got a lot of press coverage. And there was a communications problem in that you had some people saying ban fracking, truly T-shirts made that said ban frack quakes. And then you had folks in the industry that said, there is no connection to oil and gas. You can't prove it. Go away. It was a problem that needed to be solved. The only way we were going to solve it, I am not a seismologist. The only way we were going to solve this is if we could get the right people to come sit at the table in the right room and create the space where they could solve it together. And Chad Warmington was the one really with the concept of this group, and we called it a coordinating council, just because that's truly what we wanted them to do. I mean, not to take away the authority of the Corporation Commission or take away the academic freedom of the Geologic Survey or take away the business decisions that industry was going to make, but just put them all in a room together of about 15 to 20 people and start working on this together. And the first meeting was a bunch of folks kind of crossing their arms and leaning away from each other. By the second or third meeting, folks walked in and rolled up their sleeves, and we started talking about solving problems. So we started that in September of 2014. That coordinating council on seismicity meets every single month. Still, we met in December, and I asked the question in December, knowing that I was getting ready to leave, and said, is this something you want to continue with the next administration? And they said resoundingly yes. And they'd already talked to the governor-elect at the time and the secretary-designated at the time. And so I think that coordinating council will continue to work. And you've seen the earthquakes go from 907 at the peak of magnitude 3.0 or above in a year. And last year we were under 200, significantly under 200. And so the work's not done yet. We're supposed to be in like single digits, not 200. But that decrease kind of showed that this group works. This idea of just bring people together who are all interested in this problem and quit puffing out their chests and roll sleeves up and let's solve a problem. And so that group had gone on, like I said, since September of 2014. Two years later, maybe 3 years later, we said, we should do the same thing we were talking before about utilities and solar. And distributed generation is something that we don't have a lot of. That's rooftop residential solar, really. We don't have a lot of that in Oklahoma. we've got some fairly regressive policies and rules that we should change in order to open up those opportunities. But we needed to make sure that it wasn't a threat to our existing, reliable and very safe and affordable electricity in the state. And so we brought together a group in our office of, we called it a Distributed Energy Thought Group or Distributed Generation Thought Group. All the power providers in the state, solar installers, environmental advocates, industrial electric consumer representatives, the Attorney General's office, the Corporation Commission, and brought that group together and have basically met every month or every other month for the last 2.5 years. Take a specific problem, bring the right people in the room. How do we solve this? But what's come out of that, this model, I guess, that started with earthquakes, is now there's a group talking about road safety out in the Scoop and the Stack. And Tom Robbins leads the Energize for Safety Coalition, and that's a nonprofit that is bringing together industry with school superintendents and local law enforcement and ODOT and DPS and Highway Patrol to all talk about the increase in traffic out in the Scoop and the Stack and how do we keep people safe. If you look to Texas and the Permian, they're averaging 1 road fatality a day in the Permian right now. And so we looked at that and said, well, we can't do that. We're supposed to be proactively solving these problems. And so how do we get in front of those kinds of problems? And what the coalition's been able to do is bring together high school students and convince them that they should stop texting and driving out on those roads in around Kingfisher where these trucks are rolling, and bring the industry in and say, look, school drop-off and pickup is at this location at these times. Don't drive there, right? And ODOT and say, hey, we need you to put some construction money out here, and Highway Patrol and DPS about accident statistics of here's where the problems are. And so that's a group that's being led by a nonprofit, but it's that same idea of bring the people together to solve the problem. The most recent one, actually, Secretary Reese did, and Secretary Sarah Hill from the Cherokee Nation. And so it was the poultry growth up in northeast Oklahoma and the expansion of the chicken houses. And so that same model of a coordinating council, and this time it was co-chaired by the state and the Cherokee Nation to bring folks together and community members to say, look, this is what's going on in our neighborhoods, in our neighbors down the road from us, and this is what's happening with the poultry industry to say, now we understand what the impacts are, here's what we should do to resolve this. So it's kind of become this model, and I like the idea of bringing people together in a room to solve problems. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Stop crossing your arms, stop staking out your position, come in here, roll your sleeves up, and let's figure out how to get stuff done. And it's been successful, and I'm really kind of pleased to see that it's expanded into other areas.
I started thinking about that John Anderson song called Chicken Truck. It stuck behind on them suckers.
I followed the mayor down the turnpike this morning.
What do we need to know that we don't know about energy in Oklahoma? We talked on some of the controversies. Some of those controversies may come back. Well, let me start with that. What would be your recommendation, as we have so many of these new lawmakers and whatnot, if we have this tussle again between oil forces and wind forces, if that happens again, probably will. What is your advice to public policymakers if that thing comes up again?
To understand what's at the heart of the issue, right? That fight is not oil is better than wind or wind is better than oil. That fight is about finances. And a lawmaker should truly understand what's at the heart of the issue, and the issue is, at its core, finances. It's tax policy.
Who do they believe?
I think, again, a bunch of new lawmakers, and they're brand new, and it's the lobbyists that are up there that spend the time with them and can educate them. And there are some great folks, truly great folks, lobbyists up at the Capitol who spend a lot of time educating legislators. But the agencies can help with that too. I don't know that the legislators ask the agency questions unless it's about their budget. They should ask the agency questions about policies. If a legislator is going to run a bill about wildlife, they should certainly call the department and ask them and a great executive director and a team and say, come explain to me what this means before they're supposed to vote on something.
Tell us what we don't know that we should know as consumers of news, as taxpayers, as engaged citizens about the very, very high-profile energy industries in Oklahoma.
I think first you should know that they are Oklahomans. Again, I get a chance to talk to folks outside the state, or international folks all the time, and people will go, it's this industry or that industry. And what they don't understand is, those industries, go back to the earthquakes. Why was it so important for the industry, the oil and gas industry, to be part of solving the problem about earthquakes in Oklahoma? It's because those earthquakes were waking up their kids and their babies and their grandbabies, right? And so they're our energy industries. They're our, not just energy, they're our industries. These are our companies. And people should know that they truly do care. They also should know the financial pressures that are on there. That idea of return on investment and the capital requirements. These are expensive wells now. And there's a lot of pressure, like you said, to bring back that return on investment. And I think the last piece to know is that they're really, really good at what they do. Go out there on one of those rigs and talk to them about how they're chasing, this seam. It is amazing what they can do. And you talk to our utilities of how they're making their power plants more efficient, or the transmission lines that we've built. Just every aspect of this continues to just blow me away. And we never talk about hydropower, which is, we kind of take for granted. But between what the Corps does, what GRDA does, what OMPA does on their hydropower, we just kind of assume that that's all just working. And people in Oklahoma should really know and maybe better understand how much work goes into keeping all those things up, keeping those lights turned on.
What's the future now for Mike Teague?
I've joined a small consulting group, Adamantine Energy. They're based in Denver. I will be their probably one and only person in Oklahoma. I want to continue. I like what I've been able to do the last 5 years. This idea of kind of standing sometimes the intersection, sometimes the crossroads of energy and environment, and helping people figure out solutions, whether it's earthquakes or utilities or poultry industry growth in Northeast Oklahoma. Water is still at my heart. I think that there are great things and great problems out there that need to be solved. And so we're going to stay in Tulsa, drive down the turnpike a little bit less, and hopefully keep helping people solve problems.
Since you're a Tulsa guy, what's the latest Tulsa restaurant that you recommend?
Amelia's.
Amelia's?
Amelia's is great. Downtown, right off the edge of the Brady District. Just fantastic food, great little tiny place. You walk in there, you feel like maybe there's 10 or 15 other people in the entire place, and the food is fantastic. My wife and I's favorite restaurant.
Tulsa is really catching up fast. Really wonderful things happening in Tulsa.
I think both cities, right? We were in Tulsa, and when we first started this job, a lot of people said, "You're moving to Oklahoma City, right?" And I had actually asked that question to the governor when I first started, because we moved 11 times in our time in the Army, and moving again was not high on my wife or my list. And so we've stayed in Tulsa, and we like it. But being down here as much as I am and getting the chance to see what Oklahoma City's done, I think it's kind of cool that the two mayors are young and get along as well as they do, and to watch the two of them, bounce ideas, and then I think, okay, what are these things that Tulsa and Oklahoma City are doing that could be in the next small town outside of Tulsa and Oklahoma City? I mean, we love it. We love downtown Tulsa. We love to see the investment that's been put in down there, to see the people that are working on it. And so you were talking Channel 6's station there in the Brady District and the Guthrie Green. The Guthrie Green is a geothermal field.
Didn't know that.
And it's an old brownfield site, and so they cleaned it up, which was your point before. But they put geothermal wells underneath there, and they use that geothermal to help not only the Channel 6 building, but all the way around the square. So if you're going to do something, think about long-term solutions and make it better energy and environment. I mean, that's kind of been our mantra for 5 years.
Okay, geothermal, upcoming session. Mr. Secretary, thanks very much. Continued best of luck and good luck in your next endeavor.
Yeah, thank you very much for the time. I really do appreciate it.
You're listening to the new media, the Mitchell Talks Network. Learn more at MitchellTalks.com and follow me, Scott Mitchell, on Twitter @MitchellTalks.